Jody and Andy for having all this put together. Jay will be speaking later this afternoon. He and I have known each other for a long time, and so you guys are in for a treat with his presentation as well. And I'd like to thank Barron's for making this space available. It's a great opportunity, and everybody's time is precious, and there's not a lot of it to go around, and we can't all be on every committee. How many of you have already been involved with green building for quite a while? Okay, so more than half. So for the rest of you, whether it's something new, something you've tried and were discouraged by, or it's something that you're still just playing around with, whether or not it fits into your business model, which is always a very important question, this is a good opportunity. The Green Building Committee is a great place to come. Pay attention to the emails that go out about what the subject matter is for the meetings each month, and find the ones that mean the most to you. For this particular session, I really wanted to make it more of a group conversation rather than just me standing here talking to you guys. I go to a lot of these things, I speak at a lot of these events, and it's very easy, particularly this time of day, for folks to start to fade out. And I really want you to get some information out of this. And if nothing else, for you to walk away with the idea in mind that for you to be successful, or as successful as you could be in green building or any sort of high performance construction, you really need to learn how to find the right people to rely upon. Barron's is a great example of having a place where you can go as a resource to find information out about different building products. There are a lot of fantastic vendors up and down the hallway here that you can learn about their specific products. And it really behooves you to be successful in green building or high performance building to really investigate all of these different options that are out there and see what works best for you. That's been our experience over the years, is that the builders that have been successful at it have taken what we call a team approach. And it's an old cliche to do things as a team approach, but we really look at this from the perspective of it's a value proposition. That's the facts. If you can't make green building or high performance building work for you financially and be able to sell it at a profit, a reasonable profit, then it'll never work for you. And we know that the building science community doesn't really always care about that. And both Jay and I can tell you from years of experience that there's a great many ideas out there that are fantastic ideas. They're great for articles in magazines and newspapers. They're great on websites. There's some really phenomenal science that can be applied to residential construction and commercial construction. But making them practical is a completely different subject, and that's really what we want to try to get across today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who should be on your value proposition team and what your goals should be with that team. We're going to keep it rather narrow because really we could go all over the place with the degree of depth and concentration you could put into how you get the best design for your buck out of high performance or green building. But then I also want to have a couple of our partners, folks that Peg works with, give you their perspective. We have Craig Havner with Christopher Companies to talk about how this value proposition, how the team prospect works from a builder's perspective. And then we have Joe Rico and Johnny Pierpoint and Tim back here, who's sending emails rather than listening to me, to talk from the perspective of one of the key vendors, key contractors that has to be part of this integral process of designing and planning a successful green building project, and that is the HVAC contractor. The reality of the fundamental basics of, and probably one of the most expected but not necessarily best known or understood aspects of green building programs is the energy efficiency portion. That's the part that is easiest in some cases to quantify. It's generally the part that can be looked at from a performance perspective rather than a prescriptive perspective. How many of you are familiar with the difference in most of these programs between a performance path and a prescriptive path? Great, everybody, pretty much. So just to reiterate for those who didn't want to raise your hand, the performance path gives you the options of testing a house and how it's actually performing in order to verify that it meets whatever the criteria are for the program that you're looking at. What's really unique and interesting about this particular time in residential construction is that we're finally starting to see some penetration into code-built construction that embraces some of these processes, where we're looking at performance being one way to demonstrate compliance with code, whereas that's really never been the case, except for some very advanced code programs in a few states around the country. How many of you build in Maryland as well as Virginia? A couple. Okay, so for those of you that aren't building in Maryland and you haven't yet been confronted with how to deal with the 2012 IECC, rest assured, it'll make its way here eventually. What the Commonwealth does to water it down along the way is anybody's guess. But for everybody that is building in Virginia, you probably know very well firsthand how local municipalities such as Fairfax County, Culpeper County, Prince William County, James City, are already taking parts of the conformance with those advanced codes out of 2012 compliance, or really nitpicking about some of the language in 2009 compliance and making it mandatory in ways that they've never done before. And if you're not used to building in an advanced code compliant program, it can seem really overarching. They're just there to create havoc for you. They're there to slow you down. They're there to create obstacles for you to build. And we're here to tell you, in some instances, how this team approach can really help you get around and over and work through some of those hurdles. A little bit briefly about PEG. We're based in Virginia, as I said. We work pretty much predominantly in about 22 states. We're a national ResNet provider. How many of you are familiar with ResNet? ResNet is the organization that accredits Energy Star raters. We also have some programs for existing homes, etc. We're a ResNet trainer, meaning that we can train and certify individuals to go out and rate houses. We're a ResNet sampling provider. Sampling programs are a version of a qualification program wherein the builder doesn't have to have every house tested and inspected for specific items, but it's a really an onerous process if it's done properly, and it's something that I don't recommend anyone getting into if you're not used to the basics. We're a US GBC Lead for Homes provider. We're an IECC code compliance specialist. We've been under contract with the state of Maryland for 3 years to provide technical assistance to the Maryland Energy Administration. And in that, we've developed the state's best practices for energy auditing multifamily buildings, retrofitting multifamily buildings, and we've worked a lot on code training for code officials on understanding the 2012 IECC. We're an NAHB National Green Building Standard, or the ICC 700 standard verifier. We were pleased last year, Craig Havner received one of Green Partner of the Years for NVBIA. PEG also for one of our raters received Partner of the Year for our raters. We do HVAC engineering and design. One of the things that we've done over our lifetime is continuously add elements that provide benefit to our customers. So in-house, we have HVAC designers, mechanical engineers, architects, structural engineers, civil engineers, and we've taken to being able to provide a broad spectrum of modeling capability to look at the structure of a house, the structure of a commercial building, multifamily building, and when you're making the changes that are necessary for this above code or even new code compliance, being able to look and see from a 3D perspective how things have to change in the house. So there's a lot of tools that are available, and that's some of the things we'll talk about. Third-party engineering and auditing. We have about 67 permanent staff, a rater network of subcontractors that we use around the country. We've done for Energy Star, about 10,000 homes a year for the past couple of years. This year we'll certify about 14,000 homes. Part of that, a lot of that, is we're the sole rater nationwide for NVR homes. And we processed last year with utility companies rebates for advanced home construction, about $6 million in rebates, and this year we're on track to be a little bit over $10 million. So we do a lot of handling the process from beginning to end. So when we talk about looking at some of the different organizations and places that you might come across standards that play into how you want to look at what you're going to do for your high-performance construction, there are a lot of areas that have specific local programs, and there are others that are more national-based. These are just a few, and it can be mind-boggling at times how many different programs there are. These are just a few of the ones that we're involved with on a regular basis. What's unique about the building climate in Virginia, from our perspective, since we're here and you guys are here, is that there's very little incentive, public or private or anything otherwise, to incentivize high-performing home construction. Yet, as I said earlier, we're starting to find code officials that are really pushing through their ability to dictate. For example, in Fairfax County, Ron Layden decided he was going to change the reference city for temperatures for the design of houses. They decided that they were going to require that when you size, when the HVAC contractor sizes their equipment, they will not allow it if it's more than 115% above the design load or next piece of equipment. We finally got them to budge on that just about a month ago. So there are big hurdles, and we have more and more local code officials, James City, that requires a stamped set of load calculations for the house before they'll even issue a mechanical permit. So there are things changing in Virginia, even though code doesn't necessarily require it, that are even in practicality more advanced than what we're seeing happen in Maryland. So a number of the other programs, you can see there's a lot of them out there. They all have a variation on a lot of the themes that go into a green building program or an advanced construction building program. But most of them function around some basic entities of energy efficiency, water efficiency, the control of construction materials, and how the construction of the house impacts the environment around it. So when we talk about the business model modules that PEG has, we've kind of brought them together to be able to give us the ability to answer a lot of different questions. But we do a lot of forensic analysis, commercial, industrial, environmental, and engineering. As I said, we do a lot of support for state energy offices. So the value proposition team needs to be made up of a minimum of these four elements. It needs to have the builder, obviously, the person that's going to be constructing and selling the house. It needs to have the engineering involved in the design of the house, whether that's the MEP, the structural engineer, whoever is involved in the engineering of the house. The key trades. When we talk about the key elements of effective green building, HVAC systems obviously are a huge part of that, so it's imperative that you have your HVAC contractor be part of this value proposition team. But also looking at your window manufacturers, your insulation manufacturers, your lighting manufacturers, your appliance manufacturers. There are a lot of things that go into being able to qualify for code and above code programs, depending on how far above code you want to go, versus just being able to meet some of the specific code requirements. And then third-party building information modeling. Building information modeling has gone a long way in the past 10 years, Jay, from very rudimentary design, very specifically, mostly for commercial buildings, to getting to the point where it's got much more flexibility and capability. And we're going to show a couple of examples today and not get into a whole bunch of detail. But I've got two folks from PEG here. That one of them, Scott Atkinson, who's been with PEG for 10 years now, has a lot of experience with REMRate, which is one computer program used to model a house and its energy efficiency and its performance. And then Gabe Miranda heads our Manual J team and HVAC design, and he'll give a little bit of insight into the RightSoft product and how it can be manipulated in advance of design and construction to help make sure that when you design a house, A, it's going to be compliant with whatever code or advanced code program you're trying to meet, and B, you've analyzed all of the trade-offs to determine what gives you the best return on investment for the measures that you're going to place into that house to meet those requirements. We don't need to do all that. All right, so when we're talking about effective design with this value proposition team, the things that we want to look at, first off, is what are our criteria? Where are we trying to get? So if we're looking at, are we doing either new code compliance or above code compliance, it's imperative that you work with a team member, and I really recommend, how many of you have read the 2009 and or 2012 IECZ? There's not a lot of people. It's not exciting reading, but it will be, without question, your most advantageous tool to be as intimately familiar with it as you possibly can, so that you can have effective conversations with code officials, with building departments, with contractors and tradesmen, anyone that's going to be touching your project, or even the end user, the homeowner. If they say, Why are you doing that? And you can explain to them where in the code it says that you need to do that. At the last code meeting that we had at Fairfax County, there was a immensely irate gentleman there who wanted, because of his personal health requirements, to have a house designed to maintain a temperature that code doesn't support. And the code officials in Fairfax County said, we won't approve it, period. Period over out. You're not building that house. You can build a house that's code compliant, rip it out, put in whatever you want, but the builder is going to build a code compliant house. I don't care what temperature you want your house to be. So for you to understand the codes is a huge tool for you to be able to effectively communicate where you're trying to get in these conversations with your design. The first thing that you need to do is look at determining what your baseline conditions are. So if you have a set of drawings for a house that you've been building for years, or it's a new set of new plan that you have being developed, you need to be able to understand and be able to start with a baseline model of determining where that house sits now with its performance criteria, what codes it meets, and all the elements that go into building that house. So for a lot of our clients that are in this area, they've been building houses for years, same plans, over and over and over, 2x4 construction, and now over in Maryland, they're looking at, well, now I have to do 2x6, or do I have to do 2x6? And that whole trade-off of trying to determine what you can do, what it's going to cost you to do it, and what's the easiest and most effective way to meet the code requirements can't begin if you don't know your baseline. So to determine baseline conditions, best way is to do building information modeling. To take some of these software programs such as REMRate, other programs where you can model the house to see where it would meet code compliance, where it would fall in comparison to the required codes that you're looking for, and then be able to do things such as a real active, creative, and calculated manual J, D, and S. One of the biggest things, we have a WriteSoft class coming up in about 6 weeks for WriteSoft's manual J software, their Write Suite. And the class filled up in about 2 weeks after we announced it. And almost everybody coming to the class is code official. And they're trying to learn ways that they can help their builders look at a manual J that comes in and say, you know what, you missed this, that, and this opportunity that you could have changed the load, met what we were looking to see, but when you modeled it, or your HVAC contractor modeled it, you had too many things that were defaulted, and you missed opportunities to more effectively design the load for that house. And that's the best thing you can do is to find somebody, if you don't yourself have the capability or interest in learning how to do manual J calculations, is find somebody that knows how to work with that program. And Dave will show you just a couple examples today of how some minor changes to the program and inputs can significantly alter the output of the manual J, D, and S. Structural limitations, it doesn't matter, as Joe will talk to you, if on paper you've got a 12-inch exhaust hood over a ginormous range in your kitchen, and that air's got to come in, makeup air's got to come in from somewhere, so somebody draws an 11-inch automatic damper, but it's not going to fit in a 10-inch truss. That's the kind of stuff that you've got to have figured out beforehand, unless you just love having cost overruns and like to fix things in the field. So being able to find somebody who can do building information modeling and sizing and calculations, but also look at the structural elements and be able to manipulate the two together and eliminate or alleviate as many challenges as possible on the design side before you get out in the field and are trying to build it and make it work. That'll be your best avenue towards eliminating those costs in the field later. And then costs. Not just costs for changes or unplanned things, but weighing the differences. So you want to comply with code, and your exterior envelope says that it needs to have a certain performance rating. There are a whole host of opportunities. Jody with Dow can tell you all sorts of products that they work with, that they create and manufacture that can solve some of those problems. And then there are other issues that you can look at. You can look at building walls thicker, adding more things to that construction, or you can look at new technologies. And for you to be able to make a cost-benefit analysis of each of those methods and decide, all right, well, my modeler is telling me that if we put these things together in my exterior wall, it will meet the code that I'm trying to meet or the above code program I'm trying to meet. Now, I can't afford that. My square foot cost of that method costs me too much, so give me alternatives. The purpose of this type of modeling is then to say, well, you could do it this way, or this way,
and then cost out those 3 different strategies for meeting the same wall performance that you're trying to get to meet the code requirements or the above code requirements. And frankly, every builder has a different costing point threshold. We work a lot with Winchester Homes. Since they own the lumber, it's a lot easier for them to pay for 2x6 wall construction than it is to go to different exterior sheathing products. So that's a business decision for them. It could be the same thing for you. If part of your building process may already be above code, but this is the way you've done it because you feel it's quality construction, you've done it for years, then you may already have worked into your costs what is needed to be able to get to the performance threshold that you're looking for. Next, you need to evaluate and overlay any new requirements. So any of those things that are above your baseline that have to be changed, this is the ability, once you have that effective baseline, this is where you can take in effective building modeling all those different changes and work them in and try them out before you have to go out in the field and see whether or not it works. You can try it out in a computer simulation. Then looking at the offset comparison and that cost analysis, again, this is where you have that opportunity to then look at those elements and see which one makes the most sense for you from a financial perspective. So when you're looking at trying to engage these parties, we have different parties that you need to work together. It's best if possible for you or one of your consultants to be the central hub of the organization that's going to work with the different elements of that value proposition team. You have the contractors that have to implement whatever construction methodology you finally decide upon. You have to have the partners that are going to be out in the field that are doing analysis. You're going to have the field testing that verifies that after it was built the way that it was modeled, that it actually worked. And then you're going to have interaction with code officials or some sort of jurisdictional body that is looking for that confirmation that the requirements that they're looking for and expect to have met have actually been met. That's one of the biggest challenges too for us these days, is meeting with code officials and explaining to them how the field verification, inspections, and testing that we perform in the field meet the intent of the code. And sometimes they're happy to take our forms, whether they're not our forms, but say ResNet's forms or some other Energy Star forms, they're happy to take them and say, okay, great, you're a third-party qualified, certified individual. We'll take this form, we'll accept it as for our insulation inspection, our air barrier inspection, and others won't. And that's just the life of dealing with code officials. But keeping in mind your vendors, your suppliers, working with your local code officials. It's amazing how far you can get if you actually go sit down with Ron Blade and his guys and really explain to them what you're trying to achieve and why you're having a challenge with it. ARS has been enormously successful with, everybody was saying, oh, they'll just reject everything. They don't want this type of drawing. Now they want different colors on the drawing. Now they want a different font on the drawing. And if you go and you sit down and you talk with them and you don't rely on a permit package runner to communicate for you what you're trying to convey to them, it'll really help you out in the long end. In other words, at the end of the day, all of these parties that you have to work with to build a house, your role as a builder is to help them facilitate your process deliverable. You're trying to deliver a house that you've sold to a buyer. You need all these people to help you get there. So that's really one of the big takeaways, is to make sure that you don't look at this as an obstacle to you getting to the finish line. This is really, that is the finish line, is to get all these parties involved and working with you to deliver what you need to sell to keep your business viable. All right, so I'm going to switch over for a couple minutes here. These are just 2 examples. There are a lot of software programs. Jay writes a lot of software programs. These are 2 that are pretty well known in the industry. RemRate is one of a very few approved softwares that ResNet allows for the modeling and verification of houses for Energy Star. So because of that, a lot of people are familiar with it. Within RemRate, you have the opportunity to test out and verify code compliance. If you're doing Energy Star, this is where you verify that the home is Energy Star compliant. It can be used for National Green Building Standard or for Lead for Homes for verifying the energy efficiency part of those programs. RightSoft is another program that's used for HVAC, residential HVAC design. Basically, this is what creates a manual J. There are a couple others. Elite, what's the other one? Elite is the other biggest one that's used. Again, in write-off, you can do code compliance, reporting and analysis, obviously load calculations, the system design, and then the equipment selection. But having all these done without working with the HVAC contractors and understanding the structural limitations of the design that you're trying to put the system in is only one part of it. And that's, again, what we're trying to get across is that to get this effectively working together, this is just a starting point. You want to talk about it, Rick?
That'd be fun.
All right. Again, this is Scott Atkinson with PEG. Yeah.
All right, kind of like Matthew just said, the goal is to take a building and figure out what the best path for getting a home to meet a certain energy compliance may be for your particular needs. Generally speaking, what we might do is have a set of building plans delivered to us with a list of specifications like your insulation, the windows you might want to use, the HVAC equipment you plan on using. And we can enter all of that into this modeling program, and it will let us know what your particular code compliance may be for a certain HERS index, which are all going to be located on the right side of the screen, which lets you know if it's going to pass the Energy Star version 3, what your HERS index is, and then all the different codes, and whether or not it passes or fails. In this modeling, this is where if you're not, say, at this particular time passing your Energy Star, we can look at the various options, whether it be increasing wall insulation from a 2x4 to a 2x6. And is that going to be enough to get you where you need to be? Do you need to upgrade your furnace from an 80 AFUE to a 90 plus? And is that going to get you where you need? Kind of like Matthew had said earlier, every builder's got a different avenue or a different path that they want to take just in terms of cost to get them there. And it's extremely easy to be able to manipulate this program in a matter of seconds to let you know that's where you want to go. Particular instance, at the moment, we happen to have a HERS index set at a 64. If I could check, say, just wall insulation, it happens to be at an R19 at the moment. If we changed it to an R13, rechecked that, and we notice that we've now increased our HERS index by 3 points. And that's just by changing wall insulation in one area. It counts to a 3% savings in your overall bills just from changing wall insulation. Another option that you may have could be looking at mechanical equipment. We currently have this building set to be 80 AFUE equipment. If we want to change it to say, this happens to be here, maybe 94 AFUE equipment. The HERS index can drop by 7 and pass Energy Star. A number of different paths. I think we had spoken earlier about doing mechanical ventilation. In terms of trying to be a green builder, homes are being built tighter to meet different code requirements or even Energy Star requirements. And then the tighter you build homes, you're going to have to bring in some sort of fresh air to be able to get stale air out or get multiple appliances in your home. You want to make sure you're certainly well ventilated. There are a number of different paths for being able to ventilate your home due to bathroom-style fans, which exhaust air. You can have ERV and HRV systems, or you can draw So you might have a supply-only system with, I'll just leave it at 100 CFM, 20 hours a day, but we're going to be using the actual HVAC unit itself that's going to be the fan blowing air in. HVAC units can have several hundred watts of power, I don't know, 600 watts running a fan. And now we're going to drop the Hertz index to 67 and not pass the way the house is currently set up. Or if we want to just go with the way I had it before, just a bathroom style fan, it's going to draw the same amount of air, same hours per day, but maybe only be 34 watts of power. And make a pretty significant impact in the overall energy usage for that home to reach the same needs.
Is your rate the total flow rate on that?
Which one are we looking at?
Yeah. Is that the total flow rate?
Yeah, and so, you know, in this particular instance, we're drawing 100 CFM of air 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
Again, just have to do one.
Yeah.
What's important about the ability of these programs is that we can then take any of these reports and run them individually. So where a lot of these programs were originally developed to run for tax credit compliance, now we predominantly run them for code compliance. So we can produce a 2009 IECC report out of this program and attach it to a permit application for a code official and confirm for them that it in fact meets ASHRAE requirements and meets the IEC that's in force for that particular jurisdiction. However, if we took this exact same house, the exact same materials, probably have to change the reference city for design temperatures, but if the design temperatures and all other things were the same across the river, it would not pass 2012 code. Being able to find this out now, rather than when the house is done and you're trying to get your occupancy permit, can be huge.
Probably the last thing I'll speak with too, but just in terms of, you know, being able to model for different areas, this also gives us the ability to also model for just different orientations that the home may face. It does make a difference if you're north-south or facing east-west. So even when getting all this modeling done, you know, we certainly want to make sure that we, you know, in most instances, we just go ahead and worst case a home. So that way, no matter what you're building it, it's always going to be what you're expecting for that, what not worse.
Some of the changes in some of these programs, particularly Energy Star, is that Energy Star 3.0 had a requirement for lot-specific manual J's. So every house had to have its own manual J done before the house could be certified, and we're starting to see code officials ask for those. That requirement got pushed to January 1st, 2013 by the EPA, but for a lot of our clients, they've been doing them all year anyway. And it's been a huge challenge with HVAC contractors to understand and help us work with them for them to understand how much difference altering the orientation of the house can make to the load requirements, the design load requirements of the house. There are still limitations with any of these programs. Working with them day in and day out really gives you a lot of insight into the way to manipulate them, massage them. Getting away from using defaults is enormous in making the flexibility and the usefulness of these programs function. Jay and I were talking earlier about there are still challenges with some of these programs to effectively input things such as shading coefficients, how much of the house. When you're doing multifamily housing, you can have buildings that are close enough to each other that the two, three floors are significantly shaded, but it's really hard to model that in a lot of the existing programs. So there are things that are still evolving in the program process, but for most of them, we're able to work into them, workarounds to get them to give us the information that's necessary.
How much can you manipulate things in the thermal envelope, such as thermal bridging, glazing,
A lot.
solar heating?
A lot, yeah. Most of the exterior envelope things they're fairly robust in these programs. That's one area where they've come a long way in the HVAC. When you get into innovative products, then you have to kind of work around it. It's still hard to work LED lighting and the efficiency you get out of them and the decreased heat load you get out of them into a lot of these modeling programs. So they're still based around CFLs, but so those are the areas where as an expert that's certified to use them, then we can write, in our expert opinion, we can justify a delta based on some of these products that the software just really can't reflect. And then we have to argue it to the code official. And sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. But to make that argument ahead of time rather than at the end is critical. Why don't you go ahead and switch to the manual data real quick?
I was just going to say one more thing. I mean, I went through this extremely quick. I mean, I can teach a class for 4 to 8 hours on how to use this program. So certainly if anybody has additional questions when this is all done, by all means, let me know. I mean, just, briefly, this is an entire list of all the different aspects that this program can touch upon. And then once you're in each of these aspects, there's just a variety of adjustments that can be made, just to meet needs. So, certainly, if you have additional questions when this is all done, please just let me know. I'll go as in depth as you like. So, thank you.
Hi, I'll do the name. Gabe, or Dave, and
Okay, about that thing.
mouse not working.
I mean, the trackpad on it. The trackpad is working. So,
Just use the trackpad.
All right, manual J software is used in order to size equipment for a home, and you can also create a duct system and print your manual S selection sheet, which is the size of your equipment you need. So in the software, you have each floor, your basement level floor, first level floor, third level floor. And you can change, on every floor, you can change everything you can do in RemRate. You can do manual J. From floor values, wall values, ceiling values, and everything.
What about air tightness?
Air tightness, I was going to get. Thank you. And I was going to mention the 5 things, I know I have a very limited amount of time, 5 things that I think from using this software for more than a few months affect your load calculation. And the first one, just like in RemRate, is orientation. Orientation of your home. And this is worst case. You don't put this one right here. You get your worst case orientation. And it will change your load calculations and your heating and cooling loads extensively. And it can even change it. If you go from best case to worst case, it can drop or raise an entire ton in worst case scenarios. Here's where you mentioned the quality of tightness of the house. And I'm not completely sure where this is based off of. I'm not sure if it's performance in, say, lower door testing. And the most houses I've used are tight. We do a lot of work for NVR, as Matthew said, and they have a tight construction
How
quality.
does that correspond to ACH 50? Three?
And then semi-tight is what, 6 to 3 or something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah.
And that's one of the code talking about that in Maryland is
Under 3.
So everything around 2012
It's
is
coming.
tight.
yeah.
What happens if the envelope is below 1 ACH?
Yeah. If you build it over.
That's what
So
I'm
next
saying.
year,
No, but then it's oversized.
Well, then we can't use
tight house,
it.
and you start punching holes.
Right, and and there's, manual J writes in there ability to see your central vent type for heating and cooling. In this page right here. And finally, another thing that affects, you won't even be able to run it with the correct load, with the correct, with 0 errors if you don't have shading in the home. Because it has to overcome those heat gains from the sun on the, on the windows. So it gives you the opportunity to put in your shading values here. And it has a number of different options: drapes, full shades, blinds at 45, and even what color they are. And choosing this will overcome those values, will overcome that heat gain during the day. You do on every level, which I'm going to talk about.
Does manual J only calculate ducts and then what if you have a ductless mini split or something like that? Is that something that you can account for in manual J or? And more
you can't
importantly,
account
is
for
that
it. I
something
haven't
that-
had much experience in it, but they have an option.
You're still gonna be using the ductless.
Yeah.
You just won't have the duct loss.
You won't have a duct.
Okay.
No duct. Which
And
is
so-
an attic, is could be like 35%.
And so the code officials will say, well, I don't know what the hell this is, but there's no duct
Well,
loss.
it's
so-
interesting, and I don't want to get off base, but it's, like I said, it's a good question to go forward. And one thing that we found, it's funny, I made, when you said Ron Blaine to the building, it's so funny because
Well, I was
Ron
there
Blaine
with
is
the
almost
big
like Kim
guy.
Kardashian is to the,
I was at that
world
Fairfax
about
meeting when
who's
the
who,
big
right?
guy was going on.
But the thing I was gonna say is on these mini splits is that in Fairfax, talking about Ron Blaine, right now, the only brand that you'll accept is Mitsubishi. Now, there are just a wide bevy of, different manufacturers, but our Ron Blaine is only accepting Mitsubishi because they have the software to interpolate the new 93, 75 and 1770 temperatures that Matt was talking about earlier.
Right, yeah, another thing is, Fairfax County wants a Richmond, drywall for heating and cooling, which, is completely different from, maybe Washington DC or Sterling drywall.
Typically for Fairfax, we would usually use the Sterling temperatures, but Ron Blaine decided he wants them to be Richmond.
Well, and to that, Spotsylvania, they were way out there when I first met with them. Now they're using Fredericksburg.
They want a different one as well.
They were way out
Pepper,
there.
Stafford,
Yeah.
and City.
Well, and then you throw the mix in there for Energy Star raters, and he's trying to use the local weather data, like we just went through, and it was 3 degrees off, and my builder was getting turned down, this happened to be in Indianapolis, we were 3 degrees off. So it's enormous, which is what Matt's talking about in the beginning of this thing, which is to get together a team of professionals and figure out what you want to do.
Have that
As much ahead
conversation.
of time as you can. Have that conversation.
I don't know, but it seems odd that blinds were in there because blinds are so subjective. You can remove them and replace them, and okay, I didn't have them at a 45-degree angle. I had them, I had them turned down instead of turned up at 45 degrees.
Well,
and
that's,
it's totally different.
Jay's laughing, but that's, it can get down to that level of, we can say, well, it was placed in the homeowner's documents that these are the blinds they have to use, and that if they want the house to perform at this rate, they have to be at this angle, or in this part of the year. Those are the real ambiguous things that it's hard to get a code official to wrap their head around. But if you get down to the modeling,
And if Mark is familiar with the ARS checklist, which is growing, to the list that I think Gabe and Scott just showed you all the different areas of there, and it's to the point now, like you're right, on your homes you build, you've got 2-story, obviously you're not putting shades up there, and our guy at the office, he knows, we're not gonna shade them, so it's nice on a custom standpoint to have that conversation and build it as closely as you can. Which is why I
Or
always
things you
let-
can control,
Pardon?
things that are under your control.
Yeah.
so Craig, if you'd like to take a couple minutes from
Yeah.
a builder's perspective and just speak about the value proposition.
As a builder, I think, probably a lot of us are kind of generalists. We understand enough about just about everything involved with the process to get by. But we aren't experts in any specific subject matter, maybe 1 or 2, but not the 15 or 20 different individual disciplines. And up until a few years ago, that was enough, that was sufficient. And the downslope of the last housing boom, we kind of took the opportunity where we didn't have much to do to think about what we might do with the next upturn and how we might reposition ourselves and what might distinguish us from some of the other competition. And we really started looking at green building at that point seriously for the first time. And I guess in like 06 or 07, we started with some Energy Star. We were taking baby steps. We're buying some Energy Star appliances. the easy stuff. And then, I guess in like '08, we decided, well, let's go ahead and see if we can get some homes Energy Star certified. So we started doing that, and we were really looking at ways that we could get these certifications without adding a lot of cost to the homes, because we were very cost sensitive, because we were price sensitive. And any cost we're adding to the product has to get passed on, cost of goods sold. So in a very tough market, we're trying to figure out how to get these certifications, and have a more appealing product to the consumer, without spending a lot of money getting there, particularly on the product side, because we wanted it to be a good value proposition. Quick payback, we weren't back then, light fixtures, Energy Star light fixture package for a 1,500 square foot house might cost you $2,000. It was ridiculous, so we didn't do that. We did the appliances, took the low-hanging fruit, basically. So we took baby steps, and we kind of evolved, and we got to the point where we're doing everything Energy Star. And about 3 years ago, we started a lead project in Arlington, a multifamily mixed-use thing, and that was just exhausting. I mean, it was $100,000 for the consultant alone on this project. And some of the stuff going in this building was just ridiculous, we thought. So we're like, all right, if we're going to do this across the board as a corporate philosophy we wanted to, what are some different ways we can do this without just getting ridiculous with it? And at the same time, we had gotten involved with a big project in Sussex County, Delaware. And we were getting ready to start designing product over there and looking at ways we could kind of get into that market and kind of gain some momentum pretty quickly. And at that time, Delaware, the state of Delaware, is offering a program called Green for Green. And the way the program worked, if you had a certain third-party certification, in this case it was the NHB Green Building Standard, if you were able to achieve that certification, your home buyer would get a check from the state back at closing. So, in a tough market and a down economy, that was a pretty important thing to do, particularly since none of our competition at the time was doing that. A lot of them were doing Energy Star, but none of them really had started the Green for Green on any type of scale. There were some custom builders that were doing it. Insight Homes was one, a couple of early adopters there. So we started looking at that, and we got the book from NHB, and I started looking at that, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm so far behind the times as far as this stuff goes. So I started to reach out and see if I could get some help with it. And in order to comply with the program, you need to have third-party certification. Well, we had a guy that was doing third-party for us for Energy Star, but he wasn't very sophisticated. We had a couple of inspectors. Was based in Virginia, and that was his only location south of here. So we started looking around, and NHB had a list on their website of approved third-party certifiers. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, I need to find somebody. We're in Oakton. We got to find somebody in Delaware. How are we going to do this? And lo and behold, here's PEG is right down the street from us, and they've been there all the time. So I reached out to John Hensley at PEG, and he came in and spoke with us. And what a just wealth of information this guy is. I mean, so Matthew's one of Matthew's guys, and I guess you're VP for
VP of
operations. Yeah, this guy is just a walking encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to anything to do with this subject. I mean, it's just amazing. So we just sat around the table and listened to him for like an hour. It's like, all right, I think we found the right guy. So we started the program. We have all these forms and stuff, and the NHB program is more like a lead program. It's multifaceted. It's about water resources, energy resources, how you site your house, insulation, all these things. So as they were guiding us through the process, this is when we really started to bring in our other trade partners. The HVAC contractor, in terms of how you value engineer. Here's what the code says. Here's what the consultants say. All right, what equipment's available to do that? What's available cost effectively to solve these? What's the best duct mastic? What's the best way to approach your duct assemblies? Is it cheap now? We're used to using the old folding fiberglass cardboard crap. That doesn't work so well anymore. There's too much friction loss and stuff like that. It's too hard to seal, and for a number of reasons. But anyway, we're looking at all those things, and we bring in our installation contractor, who we were fortunate to have, a couple of this market that are really good. They're NHB certified already, and on the leading edge. In fact, one of them actually has a company that does compete with PEG at some level, in terms of doing the modeling, the third-party verification, stuff like that. And also your building supplier, in terms of your windows in particular. It's an important player to involve in the process. But we have all these resources available, yet you need to have a third-party certification to have any kind of standing in most places required now anyway. But in order to really say that you are and advertise that you are, I think it's important that you prove that you are, able to prove that you are. So bringing the whole team together, we're able to get a lot of valuable input. How do we solve the problem? How do we achieve the goal in ways that are cost effective, products that are readily available? In this market, there's plenty of HVAC equipment out there, but what's readily available? What can you get in a just-in-time fashion so you don't delay your building project? There's a lot of ways to solve it, but those things might not be readily available, and you might end up with problems, delays, getting the job built or whatever. So it's been a really interesting process for us, learning process, and without the support of our trade partners and folks such as PEG, we would still be struggling with it. But with their help and with their input, kind of bringing everybody together, it's been easier to solve. It's still difficult because now it seems like the codes are changing all the time. We just adopted 2009. Now we're getting ready to go into 2012. I think fortunately Virginia is going to take some steps to kind of knock some of the edges off the 2012 at the state level. And hopefully that'll get some of the localities to kind of back down a bit. Maryland, I don't think there's going to be any success there. But it's like the was it R47 or 49 or something? I mean, we just went to 38 a couple of years ago. Before that, 19 was fine for years. I mean, incrementally, what are we really gaining by that? So it's almost like codes are being updated and continually changed just for something for the code officials to do and the people that write the codes, as opposed to any real value. Because we're always keeping an eye on the affordability of housing is important to all of us, and that's one of the things that the association is very concerned with, state, national, local, everywhere. And as we start to, everybody cares about energy, and yes, we need to do the best we can there, but at some point, the expense of what we're doing will far exceed the value to us as a society. So anyway, any questions?
Yeah, hey Craig, you guys, obviously a lot of your projects are one-offs, and you design new product that's specific to that location. And and the architects and designers tend to be very proprietary on they're the guy that's calling the shot. It's my plans, but whatever. How do you then reconcile that architect with the reality is they've got a parallel set of in some ways designers that are helping you reach this? Because I can't imagine many of the architects have enough of the pure technical skills and certainly the ability to do that. I mean, how do you reconcile those guys to get them on the same page without stepping on toes?
With the lead, it's difficult, but with the NHB Green or the Earthcrafters and these other programs, it's really more of a function of the components in the product as opposed to the actual design itself. And the level of design that we typically use is not a fully detailed book of specs kind of commercial level set of construction documents. It's more of a nice floor plan with some building sections, some details, various things called out. So it gives us a lot of flexibility then. We can actually tell the architect, here's our specs for this project, and they'll write those in. They'll call out the details, but like specific windows we're going to use, we'll put those on there, things of that nature. And then we never detail to the level of putting appliance model numbers and stuff there. So at the residential level that we're typically working with, it hasn't been very difficult. And the architects also understand the importance to us as their client and just in general, moving forward. So it's not that difficult.
We generally sign non-disclosures and non-competes to get their files. Most architects will give us DWF files. If we need DWGs, then that usually comes at after we've signed our life agreement that we're not going to use them, we're not going to steal them, we're not going to share them. But we are having we find more and more clients that are looking for an independent perspective of things. So for compliance with like construction waste counts for lead for homes, if we get DWGs from an architect, we run them through an Autodesk program called Auto Takeoff, and we create a lumber package. And then their framing contractor bids off the lumber package we created. We go out and do lumber counts, and then we weigh and count the overage and the waste so that we can document for lead what the waste was based on the plans that we knew from the beginning how much lumber was going to be used. So more and more of the architects are getting used to having, some of them hate it, But more and more of them are used to it. We're doing a whole bunch. We have about 1,000 units under contract in Potomac Yards. It's all multifamily, mixed-use stuff, and KTGY is the architect of all of it. 4 different builders, 4 different parcels that we're doing, and they've all let us have, even though it's 4 different owners. They all know that we're doing their modeling for all of them and have access to all their drawings. And most of them, they want the paperwork that says, it meets res check, it meets ComCheck, it meets Energy Star, it meets NGBS, whatever it needs to meet, and that, we're able to document it so they can go to the city of Alexandria and say, here you are. And most of the architects, they don't want to step out there and say, it's going to meet all that stuff. They just want to say it looks nice.
I think the architects are
I know
great,
Jason
and don't have to do the NEC modeling and crap anymore. It's gotten way beyond what
What is interesting with regards to architects, we get along well with you, sometimes we protect old practices. You can't do that because that's the way we've always done it, we're never going to change. But what Matt was saying earlier, and just putting this team together, it's not unusual for ARS to be in architects' offices when they're doing the design of the house, because one thing, basic better and best anything in life, but some of the architects won't, many of them, you guys can, refer to your own plans and say, my guy does that or doesn't do that. Very rarely do you see architects have return air chases on the first floor. So we're walking the plan. Donnie, you can attest to this. So you can. You say, okay, here's this beautiful house. Okay, Mark, I'm going to take half of your front closet here to put in a nice return. So what are you going to give me? He said, well, you can't have that. It's like, well, so it's again, it's a learning process for them to identify where we can go, where we can't go. And there's some really, really good ones and some that are, still just trying to get up that learning curve because they're used to doing things a certain way, or, I'm the architect and this is the way it's going to be. We've had architects that they crisscross, ductwork in the middle of a staircase. Zoning is a big issue now, Mark. You've done quite a bit of zoning, and, you got 2 parallel lines with ceiling registers for the basement and floor registers for the first floor, and they bisect each other. I mean, it's what our challenges actually become jokes at the water cooler later on, and they can remember when, you talk to some of these architects and say, I got my head out of my ass and I'm finally on board with it now. But it's just a challenge, just to realize that, as far as the HVAC goes, we've got to make that happen. A builder guarantees, a house for a year or 2 years in Maryland, but the HVAC, we've got to guarantee that thing for life. So we're trying to get, my point is we're trying to get into those architects' offices ahead of time.
To Joe's point, as a builder, it's really important to get your plans at a preliminary stage through your HVAC contractor. And you can try and, address some of those issues, returns and steel and closets, and where does equipment go, do you have enough space for equipment? All those types of things can get resolved before your final plans are done, you're in the field trying to build a prototype, and it's like,
We were on one the other day, just to kind of open this up a little bit. I mean, we were over there and we did this set of plans for builder. Everything was going to be wonderful. It was a loft house, so you had that, attic space that was going to be finished off. And we got up there and it said, the unit room is just, it wasn't the way the plan said. He said, oh yeah, instead of it being a, 712 pitch, they had to change it to a 412. So, you're right. Your mechanical room is 2 feet shorter than it was shown on the plan. We went
Just
around.
shove it in there.
We kind of around with this guy about where to put the mechanical room. He said, no, you can't cover that window because I need the light, to shine on the loft area. He's like, okay, call us when you've got a different change of plan. We worked it out and everything, but right there on the day of the job, we were having to redesign where the mechanical closet's going to go.
you have more of an issue between your MEP on, commercial projects, we actually have an MEP involved. More of an issue there between them and the consultant and butting heads than you do just on single family detached. Question?
I guess the other thing that we run into a lot recently is these big, beautiful range hoods that are 10-inch round, and you got to bring the 10-inch round.
I got that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't want to do
No,
it.
no, and while we're on that, just to show you, here's a range hood that's 12 inches, okay? And you get from your builder that you're going to have a 12-inch motorized damper for the range hood to go ahead and take 1,200 CFM out while you're cooking your hot dog, okay? And now that you've got this as your range hood, you have to have another one of these per the Matt was saying who's read the 2009 code, well, we have. And it says in here, if you are going to exhaust a 12-inch round, you now are going to have a 12-inch round somewhere in the ceiling or wherever you're gonna put it, so that when Craig turns on the range hood, this damper opens, and I don't care if it's 17 degrees outside or 95 degrees outside, this isn't tempered air. It's whatever the temperature is outside that you're bringing inside. It's kind of nutty, but, you know, you see a, 11 and 7/8 inch joist and you're trying to put this in there.
Well, they have to do it or it's gonna pull down through the flues. and
Yeah, what are you
things
gonna
like
do?
that.
So you've got a choice of, like a mama bear, baby bear, and papa bear. Try to get these appliances here for your range hoods. These are a little bit easier. These are 8-inch ones. And they don't make, they don't make
Well, isn't it-
oddball, they don't make a 7 or a 9.
I
They
think
gotta
what
go
it
to an
has-
8 or a 12 or a 10.
I've never really understood it, but I think it has to do with the burners, right?
Yeah, it's a BTT.
Yes, if you got so many burners, you have to go.
And it's not exactly where if it's 1200 CFM on a range hood, it's not, 400 CFM per ton. It's not really 3 tons. I'm embellishing on that, but I mean, that's
A lot of
monster.
air.
They make some really cool diving style weighted belts to keep small animals and children from exiting the building.
Well, and then the other thing, I couldn't get a hold of it on my way over here, because then the next thing I wanted was to have a 12-inch wall cap, where, you've got your bathroom or your 4-inch, wall cap for your dryer. Well, now you've got this thing, it looks like it's a dryer on steroids. And then, God forbid it to be, God forbid it to be lead or something, because now you got to prevent rodents from crawling inside of it as well,
Then, it's also non-filter there.
That's,
So we put a filter grill on the inside.
And we have
You
to
know,
add that into the load.
Anything is.
Exactly.
Anything new like that it's not our fault. We didn't create it. We tried
And
not to
two,
create it.
the other thing on those to keep in mind.
As far as the customer's concerned.
If the kitchen,
always
is where
someone's
the,
fault.
the kitchen exhaust is, if that room is secluded or shut off the rest of the house, that's gonna be in the kitchen. So if that kitchen communicates with the rest of the house, then we have some alternative locations to bring that fresh air in, or bring that makeup air in.
this, and we've been through this with a lot of you builders, is that, like on the last one that we did with your house, thankfully, you didn't have it in your mudroom, you didn't have a pocket door or a closed door.
That's
so-
one where we had to make a physical change during.
Exactly. Here it is, so that it's, the way I hear the code officials say is that it has to be uninterrupted path to the exhaust hood, okay? So if you imagine if you have a basement with open stair rails, no door at the top, no door at the bottom, and you put a louver door on the mechanical room, you can put it down in there. But then if you had a smoke gun or, an infrared gun, you see, okay, now that you've turned it on and you've got 17-degree air outside, you've got somebody sitting next to the staircases as cold air is coming through, you're probably going to feel it, which is why we try to keep it in or around close proximity in the ceiling, like in your house, Mark, to the kitchen.
We got a question.
Why can't you use the EVRs or HVRs and have enough volume come through to satisfy whatever you've got there? Now you're tempering the air that's coming back in.
Well, that's a $3,500 option.
Yeah, but you
You gotta wire it in.
Yeah, but
We're having trouble trying to get $750 for a range hood.
it's not gonna be, yes.
Some of those, for 300, those EVRs are 300 CFM.
And this is the part
They're
about
not- they're
doing
not-
that.
They're not big enough.
Doing the cost-benefit analysis, doing the return on investment analysis, doing it ahead of time with the folks that are going to be involved in the construction, before you get to the field and are trying to figure out, we had one just last week with, or 2 weeks ago with Michael Harris in Rockville, the exact same thing. Homeowner's like, why is all this cold air in here? And trying to explain it at the end is.
Turn the range off.
So-
But open the window. If there's one thing that happens, it seems like it's always down to a final, and nobody's communicated. It's got this big hood. We do have a wiring diagram now. We use a current sensing relay.
I've brought a couple of those.
So what happens when you hit the hood on, you can put the current sensing relay in the panel box. So when you turn the hood on, it sends the current from the hood fan, opens the damper up, and lets the air in. Now, I did run across a 600 CFM